Hello, my friends, and welcome to live coverage of GP Brussels. We have reached the semi-finals. You're in the booth with me, Riley Knight, and Simon Gertsen, the Pro Tour champion. On your screen, Thomas Merchant and Giordano Fagiolo here. Turbo Fog facing off against mostly red aggro. It's very much the old versus the new here, Simon. Turbo Fog, the talk of the town this week, and Fagiolo with a slight twist on a classic archetype as well.
And also in this particular matchup, probably a benefit to have more burn spells, more hazards as compared to the more expensive glory bringers and so on.
We see red decks with that, classic red, rare and mythic package, whether it's Rekindling Phoenix, Hazard the Fervent, Chandra, and Glory Bringer, contest the battlefield very strongly. Fagiolo has taken a step back from that high end. He's playing a lot of one-drops, 11 of them, in fact, all the way through to Shock. And that means that Merchant's Fog package is a lot less reliable in the face of direct damage.
Yeah, but if you look at what is going on here, first of all, Merchant was on the play, first after Swiss, of course, and also curving out really nicely with Charter Course into Gift of Paradise.
Yes, gaining a little bit of extra life here is always a nice bonus, although here's a hasty Uncrop Crasher in order to cut Merchant down to size. He's already down to 17. Turbo Tom, they're calling him already. This guy was undefeated, I think, until round 11, maybe. He didn't pick up a loss for a long time, leading the charge, and a well-deserved first-place Swiss finish for him.
Yep. He was either 11 or 12-0 at some point. By the way, all the first to fourth players in the top 8 made it to the semifinal.
Ah, right. So we are winnowing down through the very top of these.
Being on the play is clearly an advantage, but it's not always that clear that you have all players on the play winning their match.
Merchant takes another 6 here. Certainly hope he's got something like a Glimmer of Genius. Seeing as he discarded one to Charter Course, you'd have to think he'd have another one here. You don't want to pass turn 4 with nothing to do.
He also plays 3 copies, which is one more than the usual lists do.
The core group of cards in the Turbo Fog list remains unchanged throughout most of the Pro Tour list. By and large, is what we've seen this weekend, Simon. Although there have been some little, about 4 to 5 flex slots that have changed here and there.
Yeah, at most.
And even then,
and I don't even know. I don't even know if you would count, for example, whether it's 2 Karn or 1 Karn and 1 Nissa. Sure, that's a flex slot, but it's almost interchangeable.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
I think the real flex slots are Mirari's Conjecture, a 5th ramp spell,
Oath of Teferi.
Oath of Teferi, Karn's Temporal Sundering.
Yeah, which has not impressed me.
Well, it's not Nexus of Fate. That's the main issue with it. If it was Nexus of Fate, I would definitely play it.
Rather than his Temporal Sundering, we're going to see Karn himself. So Fagiolo has the option to give Merchant either Teferi or the Oath he made to the Gatewatch after a Glimmer of Genius continues to keep the action flowing for Merchant. And look at this, Simon. Opting to send it to Teferi upstairs rather than the Oath.
One of the very rare cases where you give your opponent a Teferi off the Karn activation. Of course, the reason being Oath of Teferi, gaining 3 additional life with a Gift of Paradise, enabling double activation on Karn, and then the thing is, you're still getting that Teferi, right? It's not like you can prevent that from happening.
And of course, now we see these fog effects coming into play thanks to Merchant's Root Snare there. And a Soulscar Mage post-combat. Let's talk about why the deck is called Turbo Fog. I'm sure many players who have been with Magic for years and years will know exactly what's going on, Simon. But what's going on behind the name of this list for newer players?
Let me start with Fog. Fog, of course, is the original card that prevents all combat damage for a single green mana.
Been around for a very long time, this
and
card.
Then currently we have 8 copies in Standard, 4 Root Snare, and the 4 Haze of Pollen, which also has cycling. And then Turbo is actually the name or a group of decks that are trying to get as many land drops as possible. For historical reasons, that's called Turbo Lands or Turbo Fog. And often you combine this with effects like time, any kind of time walk effects.
Yeah.
Time walk, time warp, Nexus of Fate, and so on.
So this is just the latest iteration in a long line a proud lineage of Turbo Fog lists, and they tend not to be particularly competitively viable. There's usually 1 to 2 weeks a year where the card pool is large enough to support a deck like this. So many players, Thomas Merchant amongst them, making hay while the sun doesn't shine, while the sun is very, very clearly covered up by the fog, and he's got himself into a good position as a result.
And this might be the most resilient Turbo Fog deck ever, because it's not as fragile as in the past where you had to give your opponents extra cards with Holding Mines, or you were relying on a similar strategy but without having access to Planeswalkers.
Haze of Pollen now going to protect these Planeswalkers, and this is the very important piece of the puzzle here. Fagiolo unable, as are most red decks, unable to meaningfully contest the Planeswalkers that are on the battlefield here. And Simon, you already mentioned the Howling Mine. That's the classic enabler for Turbo Fog lists. In the past, we've seen Rites of Flourishing, we've seen Horn of Greed, cards like this. But in this deck, it's almost like the deck runs personal Howling Mines thanks to these Planeswalkers, which are then protected by those fog effects.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. You get your personal Holding Mine with upside. Both of these Planeswalkers, of course, on the battlefield there. Also, it's much more difficult to deal with a Planeswalker protected by fog than, for example, something as easy to deal with like Holding Mine. You just need an Abrade and it's gone.
Also much more difficult to protect, or much easier, I should say, to protect Planeswalkers with from damage with these fogs. It's very hard to protect them with blockers, which eventually can become outclassed or removed with removal spells or what have you. But a fog, very difficult to interact with meaningfully.
We do actually see the Oath of Teferi come down here.
Yeah. And this is going to be huge now because we see Khan and Teferi double activations. Don't get it twisted. You do not have to tap Planeswalkers in order to activate them. That's just Merchant helping himself remember which Planeswalkers he's already activated. And so now we're going to see Teferi activated a second time as well here.
So Merchant is only tapping it the second time he's activated it?
I don't know.
I don't know if that's the best.
Weird system.
Mnemonic, yeah.
It's a weird system. So, Gift of Paradise re-enters the battlefield. A weird rules interaction allows it to be attached to a permanent as it comes back into play.
Even an untapped land, of course, would be legal, but it's getting untapped by Teferi anyway.
So ultimately, no problem here. And now, in response, or after these lands have tapped, while still in the end step here, we're going to see 7 mana floated and a Nexus of Fate. This is a key interaction of this deck. The fact that Nexus of Fate can be cast in the end step thanks to Teferi's untap ability.
Yeah. And if you activate Teferi twice during your turn, that's 4 mana. With Gift of Paradise, it's even more.
So Merchant, all sorts of mana there. Generated a real ton of it and still had mana left over to cycle. Wow. Had way more mana than I thought he did there.
Yeah, he was able to untap 4 lands, and 2 of them had the Gift of Paradise, so really generating a ton of mana.
So an extra turn in the can there for Merchant. He's going to enjoy untapping. And Fagiolo, there's a very real chance, Simon, that he actually doesn't get another turn for the rest of the game.
That's my assumption. Actually, it's almost inevitable at this point.
At this stage,
I think it's academic. If you get 2 Teferi, 2 Karn activations each turn.
So it's 4 extra cards plus the one you're drawing.
I mean, in theory, Giordano could get another turn, but it would be a turn where Fog is being cast for sure.
Yes, so there's not going to be too many meaningful game actions that Fagiolo still has to make here, as we see Search for Azcanta flipped off the top in addition to that Teferi. Imagine Search is going to be another way for Merchant to pull even further ahead on cards. Look how many cards there is. Oh my goodness me. An embarrassment of riches here for the Frenchman.
Merchant can actually just ultimate Teferi here.
Yeah, and now can start exiling permanents to really put this thing beyond any doubt here. Any card drawn results in a free... well, it's not even Vindicate, is it? It's... what's the one up from that? Utter End.
Exile target permanent?
Exile target permanent, Utter End. Or is that non-land permanent? In any case, doesn't matter. Merchant, well and truly in the driver's seat. He's going at 50 miles an hour down the highway, and the destination is victory. So, Search for Azcanta to the plane now for Merchant. Does have some cycling cards if he wants to start blowing up some of their permanents there from on the battlefield for Fagiolo. Does he not have another Nexus of Fate, however? Oh, excuse me. Silly me. I take it all back, ladies and gentlemen. Of course he has another Nexus of Fate. We tend to see how many copies of this card cast per game? 7, 8?
That's a good question. It kind of depends how resilient the opposition is. Like
How resilient their psychology is to early concessions. Oh, I love this. Méchant going very early after the lands here. Scrap Heap Scrounger discarded there to Chandra. No, to Hazoret. Yeah.
I would think it's even more than 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more. I think it's like 10-ish.
Yeah. It's a lot. A lot of extra turns taken here. And let's have a look now as we see a search for Azcanta Flip into the Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. Away goes another land here. I love this from Méchant, going after the mana for Fagiolo. Often you'll see the land, the last thing that players go after with the Teferi emblem, but no, not so with this Frenchman here. He's got another Teferi to deploy should he so choose, but just going to play Nexus of Fate, shuffle it away, have another turn here.
A bit surprising that that second Teferi is not coming down. It would generate a lot of value here.
Yeah. Exile 2 more permanents a turn. Of course, it can be activated twice. Oh, have we got a blowout? Nope. Looks like is that a sleeve replacement going on there?
Look like it.
Yeah. Everything seems to be in order here. And Fagiolo in a rough and a tough spot here. One turn in the can. Upstairs, Charter Course or Spring to Mind. Ooh, Mind out of the graveyard. Draw 2, exile 2. Nice.
You can see how far Thomas is ahead. He doesn't even need that Nissa.
Wait, Charter Course is also draw 2, exile 2.
Sure.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it doesn't need the Nissa. Doesn't need anything really. Here's 5 mana and Teferi. I like this. There's better stuff here. Teferi goes up all the way to 6 loyalty now. Exile a mountain. Looks like that last mountain also going to be activated here. And Khan on 8 loyalty.
10.
Sorry, 10. Numbers are very hard, Simon. I think he put 2 loyalty counters on Khan and then didn't resolve one of the... Oh, no. Okay, excuse me. Sorry. So Glimmer of Genius is going to stay exiled with a silver counter on it. Teferi also goes up now to 6 loyalty. Remove your last land from play. And look at this. Fagiolo, never say die. Channeling that inner Reed Duke. Never concede. And Méchant still with a turn in the bank here, as you can see.
I thought he had already played a land to...
He definitely already played a land.
Yeah.
Yes, he's already played a land, so that island shouldn't be on the battlefield there. That island should not be on the battlefield there, because he's already played a land this turn, so he could play that Teferi. So we'll get that one sorted out. That's a nice easy fix here. As you can see, Méchant having to put it back in the hand.
It's been a long weekend, but 2 people in the room are still paying vigilant attention.
I miss nothing. You think I attack? You tap when I attack? Absolutely not. So Méchant now goes to his next turn. Well, he's just drawing a bunch of cards here. Oh, the activation of Search for Azcanta, excuse me. Wow, so much stuff to keep track of, Simon. A lot of cards in hand. And Fagiolo says, look, mate, I'll cut you a deal. Let's go to game 2, and then you don't have to discard the hand size. How about that? Méchant has, really shown us exactly what the deck is capable of. This was more or less a textbook game there for the Frenchman. Never really was under too much pressure. He took a little bit of damage early, managed his life total very well, started fogging after some Planeswalkers hit the battlefield, and ultimately was able to lock things up without really breaking a sweat. Yeah,
didn't even need a lot of fogs to get there.
I think one of the reasons that this list is as powerful as it is because of matchups like this. You can see the Fagiolo, look at that. Look at the position he's in. He knows that his back's against the wall. He knows that he's got a tough matchup ahead of him because the Turbo Fog list, it preys upon these creature-based aggressive decks that can never really get a foothold in a... we don't have decks in the format apart from Mono Blue which are just sort of... I don't know, even a 50-50 matchup against Turbo Fog. Turbo Fog is just very dominant against the currently favored decks in Standard.
It's also not a deck to have many 50-50 matchups.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a deck to have soul-crushingly good matchups.
Yes, or
the occasional soul-crushingly bad matchup.
Exactly, yes. And this was, if you jump on Twitter and look at what David Williams tweeted about the, he was one of the pilots of the Pro Tour of this list, and he tweeted his sideboard plan, and for against the Mono Blue Storm list, it was every single card, all 15. Against Blue Base Control list, it was 8 of them, and against basically every other deck in Standard, nothing.
Yeah.
I believe the sideboard plan was 2 words, "You're good."
And that has changed.
Yes.
Because now players like Giordano Fagiolo have 2 insult to injury in their sideboard.
This is the latest and greatest piece of technology here. And talk to us about the other technology that Fagiolo has access to post-board and what else we might expect.
So we have 3 of Chandra, Chart of Defiance, and Cut 2 Ribbons, 2 Glory Bringers, the 2 insult to injury, and 2 Chandra's Defeat, and Singleton's Magma Spray, Either Sphere Harvester, and Rekindling Phoenix. And you can already tell that most of these cards will do stone cold nothing against Turbo Fog.
What about something like Chandra? Because obviously we bring in the insult to injuries. That's a nice, clean upgrade to many of the cards that are in the list. But what about Chandra?
I think she's too slow.
Okay.
It's fine. It's a fine inclusion because she will deal damage no matter what. That's probably better than Rekindling Phoenix, but I would say worse than Hazard, because Hazard, with that haste, potential haste ability, really good to recover from mulligans, is a card that I like a lot more. If you ask me about sideboarding here, you easily take out the Abrades. That's a card you definitely don't want.
Yeah.
I would keep in all the cheap cards just to get come out of the gates as quick as possible.
That was my next question. What is the game plan here for Mono Red Aggro? Does it really want to start quickly?
Yeah. The thing is, I think a common misconception about Turbo Fog decks is, and this is based also on the historic nature of Turbo Fog decks, that they are fogging to stay alive. They are fogging only when there is the final attack that would kill them. But this deck is actually fogging every turn to protect the Teferi most often. So you are not even racing the opponent's life total as quickly as possible. You just need to have 5+ power on the battlefield to force the fog over and over again.
Yes, often what we see is these fog effects protecting the planeswalkers there. So a last look at the sideboard here for Fagiolo. We do expect those insult to injuries to come in, but not too many other changes to be made. Maybe a Chandra, a Glory Bringer is another hasty threat. I don't know. We'll see. Let's move on and have a look at the sideboard of Thomas Merchant, the French player here, with double Jace's Defeat, quad negates, 2 Barals, a Nezahal, double Carnage, Tyrant, Settle, Cleansing Nova, Invoke the Divine, and a Gear Hulk.
Yeah, really, really interesting sideboard here.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Without going into the details for all the other matchups, just looking at the red deck that he's facing, Insult to Injury, of course, the key sideboard card, he has Settle the Wreckage to kind of blow out any kind of Insult to Injury turn, and it's a decent card on its own. He can bring in a couple of negates, but that's a dangerous kind of card because it might be dead. And then you have Invoke the Divine as a reasonable answer to a Bowman Courier and Scrappy Scrounger. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Torrential Gearhulk make an appearance as well.
Plenty of options here for Merchant, but again, the main deck is pretty rock solid, you have to say, against a list like that. We saw, as we said, Simon, we saw him win game number 1 without really breaking a sweat. Didn't really have to break stride there in order to completely steamroll his opponent. So Thomas Merchant, I have to say, in a good position in game number 2, although the challenge he will face, the most meaningful challenge he'll face, is being on the draw.
Yeah, but also, what do you take out? Because now the real question is, how scared are you of Insult to Injury? And how much do you want to weaken your main game plan? I think, for example, Search for Escanta, while slow, is still one of your most powerful cards. Of course. So it also enables these kind of hands where you just have, for example, no white source or no green source, only 2 lands. It's still an easy keep if you have Search for Escanta. So
because you can churn through your deck, find those cards that you need.
You can start cutting, 1 Gift of Paradise, 1 Charter Course. What else is there? 1 Oath of Teferi, some of these one-offs. But in the end, there is a limit to how many cards you can sideboard. And I've actually been discussing this with my teammates who have been saying, there's Insult to Injury, and there might also be Spyglass, and we need to be really prepared now for this matchup. And suddenly you have a list of 8 cards that you want to bring in. But what do you take out? I really don't like weakening your main deck if your game one is so good.
Because we see this, right, in other decks, not necessarily Turbo Fog lists, but I mean, the best example I can think of is the Mono Blue list, right? It plays a very combo-esque game where, it has a very linear plan that's difficult to sort of pivot away from. And so if you bring in too many cards from the sideboard, all of a sudden you're affecting your just pure chances to combo off. And Turbo Fog kind of falls under that category as well for me.
And then you have to really answer the question whether which of these decisions will maximize your win percentage in the end.
Let's see how these decks have positioned themselves post-board here. Méchant, of course, just one game away from finding his way into a GP final. I can tell you a little bit about this bloke, as you can see. He is a Legacy enthusiast, Simon. He plays Legacy very, very gladly. I think he's a Grixis Control pilot. I got the chance to hang out with him a little bit on Friday and played some games of Legacy and had a great time. He's a good fellow as well. Quiet bloke, very very reserved fellow, but all the same, someone who, I mean, we didn't actually get the chance to catch up too much about Standard, but obviously he knew exactly what he wanted to play coming into this weekend, and what a masterful performance he's put on. So players now making the final preparations as we head into game number 2. As we said, Méchant is going to try to break serve here. Fagiolo will be on the play. Well, he'll have the choice. One can only assume he'll be on the play. And if he's victorious, ultimately will find himself in the GP final. On the back table, Jeremy Desani is facing off against Alexander Gordon-Brown. And fans of the French Pro Tour champion will be very glad to know that he is up 1-0. Esper Control 1 game up against Solte Cards I Own.
Desani crushing it so far. This top 8 just winning 2-0 against Wafo Tapa, another Control master.
So these players now, Méchant and Fagiolo, examining their opening hands. Didn't get a great look at Méchant's hand there. It seemed to have a couple of copies of Fog effects plus some lands, so maybe that's a good enough start, although he's going to need some business. Fagiolo gets things kicked off now with a Bomat Courier. Get you down to 19 and already start to fill up the postal sack. We'll see what Méchant, how he wants to open up this game. Fagiolo does play quite a concentration of one-drop Simon, and this is the sort of start he wants, a nice aggressive early one.
Yep. Now, for example, a Scrounger would be great. Your creatures are not really being dealt with, so you can just always choose the highest power option.
Doesn't have anything else to commit to the board here. We might see a Lightning Strike or a Shock or something of that nature. Yes, Shock you. Don't know if that came as a shock to Thomas Méchant, who obviously would have recognized that something was up. Ooh, and doesn't spend that last point of mana. Fagiolo already showing some cracks in the armor here because he has to spend his mana efficiently. He has to get every advantage he can in these opening turns, or he's going to be toast. Oh no. Oh no, it just goes from bad to worse here as a mismatched mountain comes down. After all the good work he did with those full art Battle for Zendikar mountains, then there's a land station basic from Amonkhet. A real whiff there for Fagiolo, Simon.
But a decent 3-drop.
Oh yes, let's talk about the creatures. Yes.
Goblin Chain Roller. I do only like the shock play if you have either a lot of burn left in your hand or you are working towards a Hazoret. Because otherwise, I think killing the Turbo Fox Planeswalker is so vital to your game plan that you should actually be holding those burn spells.
Didn't listen to a word of that, to be honest. Just still can't get over that mountain. Ugh, look at it. And right in the middle as well, so like trying to create some kind of symmetry around it. I guess that redeems it somewhere, but ugh, it's just awful. What a terrible situation for us all to be in. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, for the visual aberration that you are being forced to suffer here. Double Bomat Courier's getting in. Going to grab some more of these cards off the top. And it's going to be a good way for Fagiolo to refuel later on here, Simon.
Mm-hmm. And especially to draw towards more burn spells. Because those are the ones that Méchant is going to fear from now on.
cycles away a haze of pollen. Obviously has enough fog effects to be going on with here. He's not under a huge amount of pressure. Well, then again, being on 8, he's going to have to start to protect that life total a little bit here.
That is actually quite a bit of pressure.
Yeah, I guess so. I take it back. I take it all back.
It's a lethal attack, and I don't know how many extra cards.
Just looking at it, it's like we haven't seen, the hard-hitting 4 drops. But no, this is exactly what you talked about here, Simon. He needed an early start to Fagiolo in order to get into this game. And despite Bomat Courier looking like a pretty anemic creature when it comes to beating down, it's getting the job done. And now backed up with Goblin Chainwhirler, backed up with Shock going to the Dome. Yeah, Merchant on a surprisingly low life total.
This is the key turn. Merchant is representing Fog and Settle the Wreckage.
But an insult to injury is going to hit but get negated. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Close call.
But 4 mana is enough to negate and Fog. And we know Thomas has a Fog here.
He's got to. I mean, he
you don't cycle Haze of Pollen to die the turn after.
It's like, cycle Haze of Pollen because I really need to hit a Fog here. It is going to be Root Snare. Going to keep those creatures at bay for at least this turn. But yeah, that insult to injury. Lucky that Merchant, very fortunate for him that he had the negate in order to prevent insult being added to this particular injury here.
Lucky or well sideboarded?
Well sideboarded.
Your call.
Well sideboarded. No, I mean, luck doesn't really come
because
into it.
The number of negates to bring in is a super interesting question.
Sure.
Even with full knowledge of the deck list.
No, he put it in his deck to draw it, so yeah. We move on now with Fagiolo and Merchant having a quick read of his injury part of it. Which
injury, 2 damage to a creature, and 2 damage to a player. No matter who controls the creature.
So Fagiolo can target one of his own creatures, for example, his Goblin Chainwhirler, and still get 2 damage through on Merchant. So now we're going to see Fagiolo sacrifice both Bomat Couriers and pick up both lots of post here. It's been a big day at the Royal Mail here for Fagiolo. And Merchant back against the wall just a little bit here.
Doesn't look too concerned.
No. As I said, very reserved gentleman. Not going to give too much away. Fix the hair quickly here. Got to look good for those cameras. Got to stay fresh, ladies and gentlemen. You got to stay fresh. Fagiolo in for 6 now. But this injury from the bin could wrap things up. Fagiolo taking a different course. It's going to be Chandra Torch Defiance. And Merchant packs it up. Wow. Fagiolo steals a game there after an aggressive start. And this is what you said he needed to do, Simon. Get out of the gates quickly. Bomat Courier, refuel the hand early. Goblin Chainwhirler able to poke through some damage as well. And Merchant ultimately had a hand that just wasn't that great.
Yeah, we unfortunately didn't get to see much of his hand. But the fact that he was cycling the Haze of Pollen there, didn't have Search for a Scanner, didn't have Teferi, it seems like he kind of didn't draw the right half of his deck. So even negating that insult, which was, of course, really important, didn't get him there.
No, it wasn't good enough here for the Frenchman to stay in the game. Looks like he's going to make some mild adjustments to his list, as is Fagiolo, as you see him cast his eye over his sideboard. We can have a look at the sideboard as well here of the list and see exactly what he's working with. This mostly red aggro deck, so named because it has perhaps one of the lightest commitments to the Black Splash that we have seen. You see it there on your screen. Only 4 Dragon Skull Summits, 0 actual factual black cards outside of Cut to Ribbons, and the Scrap Heap Scrounger, the only other card requiring black mana. Effectively, the deck is able to function on just mountains, no matter how mismatched they are, and as a result, a much more consistent mana base. No Canyon Sloughs that come into play tapped.
Just a lean machine. Only 2 carries F, so no problem with the legendary rule. No Chandras might be a bit surprising, but opting to put them in the sideboard for the matchups where they really shine, going for the more, for the cheaper approach, really, emptying your hand, and then 4 mana is where the hazard, the finishers really enter the battlefield.
And this is what we see typically when the red decks go bigger, when they play the Glory Bringers, the multiple Chandras, the Rekindling Phoenixes in the main deck, they have to cut down on the hazards, because most of the time, if you have a deck glutted with 4 and 5 drops, your hazard isn't going to attack on the turn that it comes down.
And that, of course, is the main draw to Hazoret. This combination of Bowman Courier and Hazoret alone, and just put in some cheap creatures, some cheap spells, no matter what they do, is worthy of a constructed deck.
Let's have a look at what Marchand is working with. You will have seen this list before, of course. It's the talk of the town, as we've said several times. And nothing too special going on here. Oath of Teferi and Spring to Mind in those flex slots. I hesitate really to call any other slot, maybe the third Glimmer of Genius, but there's always generally one Khan, there's always one Nissa to go along with the 4 copies of Teferi. And I agree with what you were saying before about Search for Azcanta. This card critical, absolutely critical in this deck. And I don't really like going below. I mean, I guess 2 would be okay, but
2 was the David Williams list at the Pro Tour.
is that right?
So
really
3 is now becoming the new standard.
Yeah, I feel like that's just a better way to. You've got to have it, especially on turn 2. I mean, early pressure again is something that this deck doesn't. It can deal with. It doesn't fold to it necessarily because of its transitional plan to move into looping Fogs before ultimately looping next use of Fate. And as a result, a turn 2 Search for Azcanta can be very, very decisive in how a game plays out, and we see that exact play made here by Marchand. Looks like he's got the treasure chest version of the Search for Azcanta, the clearly superior version. And Fagiolo, once again, he's mostly red aggro on mostly mismatched mountains.
1 power on turn 1, 3 power effectively on turn 2.
Yep.
This is exactly what he wants to.
That's how he wants to do it. And a Glimmer of Genius hitting the bin here for Marchand, who may be more hard-pressed than usual to start deploying those Fogs. Although Gift of Paradise, a great way to buffer the life total here.
And both players are operating on full steam ahead here.
Mm-hmm.
If Jordana has another 3 power to add to the board, both of these players have done basically what they want to do in turns 1 to 3.
So maybe an Arncrop Crasher or perhaps a Goblin Chainwhirler here for Fagiolo.
Yeah, not a big difference either way.
Well, let's see what this particular chef is cooking. Because as you mentioned, Simon, it's all about the early turns, really. Once we get to the late turns, the game is more or less Dunsky's if Marchand is still at a healthy life total with plenty of cards in hand and perhaps an active Planeswalker or a way to deploy one.
Yeah, then you can easily see that you really don't even want that Glorybringer in your hand. It's just going to prevent Hazoret from attacking. It's going to get fogged really easily. You don't want to tap 5 mana for 4 damage, basically, for 4 combat damage.
The small Simeon getting across along with Karizev and the postal robot here. And a Soulscar Mage. Ugh, that is not a great play here for Fagiolo, because it ultimately means that he's not developing his board in the way that he wanted. You mentioned, Simon, he wants to play a 3-power creature this turn. He hasn't done that.
No, that would have been what he wanted to see. Thomas with the Dream Draw.
Yeah, this is perfect stuff here. Turn 4 Teferi, untapping 2 lands. He'll have access to 3 mana, which could really be anything. Ultimately, what he's going to want to cast this next turn cycle is a Fog, and I'd be very, very surprised if he didn't have it, because otherwise that'd be, that'd be a very gutsy Teferi. Very gutsy indeed, B1. Let's see what Fagiolo can do here. Already you can sense that the needle is turning against him.
I also think the life totals haven't been updated here, because while Marchand gained 3 life from Gift of Paradise, he definitely took more than 2 damage this game already.
Yes, it seems that one of those attacks has been missed out. Here is a Lightning Strike, however. Didn't see where it was pointed. Was that going to Teferi?
I don't think so, but
Going
I
straight
would like
upstairs.
I would like to see it be pointed at Teferi.
We need to get those life totals updated there, so we'll make sure that we've got the correct life totals there for people to see, because it does look as though they may have changed here. Looks like Marchand is actually, yes, down to 14. So an extra couple of points of damage have been missed here. Here's an Insult.
Okay, and that's huge. So if Thomas is at 14, then I think this is a lethal attack.
All of a sudden, all of this damage is doubled. Marchand is in fact at 14. We're getting that sorted out. A little problem with the life totals right now, but on 14 life, is Marchand dead to this attack with an insult to injury?
No.
He didn't have the counterspell. He can't Fog because, of course, damage can't be prevented this turn thanks to the insult. He's not quite dead, but wow.
Yes, he is, with the shock.
With a shock as well for Fagiolo, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, has Giordano Fagiolo taken this game out. Merchant examines his hand, searching for some way out of it here.
Wow.
An incredible turn of events here as Giordano Fagiolo turns the screws in his opponent with that clutch insult to injury. Looks like Merchant is going to reveal his hand and extend the other one, and Giordano Fagiolo, round of high fives and hugs from his friends here at the feature match area. They can't believe his luck, and I have to say, poor old Thomas Merchant. We talked about him having the dream start.
But both players had basically perfect draws.
And ultimately, it looks like the Fagiolo mono or mostly red draw trumps the best draw possible from Thomas Merchant.
Because of insult to injury. Only because of insult to injury.
Now, there was a player, reasonably well-known standard player, who tweeted about this card in the week. I can't remember the name of this person. Someone who has something of a resume when it comes to standard. Someone whose advice you should generally follow. Any idea who it might have been?
Brad Nelson.
It was Brad Nelson. It was the people's bard, Nelson. And I'm going to tell you this, ladies and gentlemen. If Brad Nelson tweets about a card you should be playing in standard, you better bloody sit up and take notice, because the man's a master. Congratulations, Giordano Fagioli. We're going to move on to Alexander Gordon-Brown and Jeremy Desani here, the French Pro Tour champion, already up 1-0 against his Sultai mid-range opponent, Sultai Tradebinder here.
What is he Sultai about?
Well, at the moment, I think he's a bit Sultai about the fact that he's down a game, because Desani has obviously taken out the first one. And this one continuing at a slow pace. Desani at 22, facing down an attack from the Jade Light Ranger here.
Yeah, I've been surprised by the success of the Sultai mid-range deck, but especially against Esper Control, it feels like you are not fighting a fair fight. Sure, protecting your creatures with negates and blossoming defenses is nice, but if it's effectively just a 4/3 vanilla creature that's getting in there, Esper Control has all the time in the world.
Yeah, this is the thing. This deck, this Sultai list, it just isn't able to pile on the same amount of pressure. I feel like it's a mid-range list that is built to beat other mid-range lists. With the Scarab God, with a Hostage Taker, for example, plenty of excellent removal. But hoping to win games against Control by bringing in 4 copies of Negate and 3 Glint Sleeve Siphoners, as well as something like a Vivian Reed. I don't know, man. I don't know. I love Wild Growth Walker in this list, though. 1/3 for 2, gains life with all the Explore triggers. Seems very, very good against the piddly little monsters from the red decks.
Definitely unexpected, out of left field, but doing a great job.
Jade Light Ranger comes across here. Desani committing a Walking Ballista for 3 to the battlefield, not looking to block the Ranger here. And now the Scarab God for Gordon Brown. So he's definitely fighting. He's definitely going down swinging. Well, I don't even know if he's going down. He's bobbing and ducking and weaving, getting onto the battlefield with a 5/5. But Desani now, what are we going to see here for 6 mana? Torrential Gearhulk in the main phase, and let's just exile that Scarab God before you get a chance to untap.
Torrential Gearhulk has been, for me, probably the card of the weekend.
So good.
It's made a resurgence, and a big one.
And we have seen a decided downswing in blue-white based control decks, where the white component traditionally involves a lot of enchantment-based removal, which obviously Torrential Gearhulk is just next to useless alongside of. And even though the Citrus Assassin Gregory Orange took down the Pro Tour, the standard portion of it at least, with his white-blue list, signature Gregory Orange approach there, it hasn't had the same success this weekend, because we've seen players play 4 copies of Raska's Contempt and effectively cast 6 to 8 copies of it with Torrential Gearhulk. Gearhulk had a very important piece of that puzzle, as you say, Simon, especially given that the Esper lists that are more focused on black play so many more instants.
Interesting sideboard card here. Johanni's Expertise could be used this turn, actually, to put the Scarab God back into Gordon Brown's hand. Because the Scarab God is a scary card to play against.
It is indeed. Although at the moment, no cards in the graveyard for it to take advantage of.
Yeah, and that's probably the saving grace for Jeremy, who, by the way, if he passes the turn, is also facing a negate in Gordon Brown's hand.
Zani has a quick look at the lands available for Gordon Brown. Looks like he's got all his colours, especially with 3 energy available to him. And Zani going to shift the turn back to Gordon Brown, who gets to untap with a negate. Always a good feeling against blue base control. So let's have a look and see what's up now with Gordon Brown. He's behind on lands, at least. Debatable as to whose board state is better right now. The Scarab God just a 5/5, not doing a huge amount without any of these creatures in the bin.
Mm-hmm. I think, given that, it's definitely the Zani's board set that's better. That Walking Ballista is turning into a threat very soon. It also kind of means that it's almost irrelevant what Gordon Brown has in hand. It's not the scariest card either. Oh, I like the Zani here.
Glensleeve Siphon at the play for Gordon Brown now. Back to Desani, however. We'll see if he wants to fire off this Glimmer of Genius. Any reason not to do that here, Simon?
You can also just pump your Walking Ballista. That way you're playing around, like softly playing around negate.
Well, Desani walks right into that negate, and Gordon Brown all too happy to snap it off instantly there. Desani with an Essence Scatter, the pickup for this turn.
I think we have to see the Yanni's expertise, because I don't want to call it a blowout, but it's such a tempo play, and you get to pass the turn with 4 mana. You've just actually probably baited out the negate, the second negate of the game, and then when Brown goes to recast the Scarab God, you get to syncopate it.
So it looks like Desani there thought about a Walking Ballista activation, ultimately just went with a Torrential Gearhulk attack here.
So Desani was debating whether to Yanni's expertise before or after combat. But if he does it before combat, he only deals 3 this turn. He wanted to get in for the full 5, which was a bit ambitious, I think, because what do you do if there is a multi-block on your Gearhulk? But because you have the Walking Ballista in play, you know that you're quite safe in Gordon Brown not blocking.
2 damage marked on the Scarab God right now. And we could see Desani here deploy this Yanni's expertise. Looks like that's going to happen. Is he not going to activate the Ballista one last time? Yes, okay. That makes good sense there. 1 more damage upstairs to Gordon Brown. And still 4 mana floating. He didn't spend it on anything. He's just floated it and then activated ability. Certainly, you're allowed to do that. Very weird way to play it, but all the same. There is Yahenni's expertise. Creatures get -3/-3. And you can play a 3-drop for free.
If you want.
If you want. You don't have to. No one's forcing you to do anything like that. You don't want to cast a spell? You don't have to. So, Gordon Brown. What can he find here? Needs a way to put himself back into this. Facing down a 5/6, dominating the board effortlessly is this Torrential Gearhulk here.
Yeah, it's not quite a 2-turn clock.
Scarab God numero... Oh, no, that was the same one. Excuse me. It's the 3rd time it's been cast.
But is it going to resolve? I don't think so.
No. Essence Scatter. Oh, Syncopate. Even better. Very good. Exile that. Get that out of here, says Jeremy Desani. That is the 3rd time it's been put on the stack, but not going to make it to the battlefield this time. This one slipping away from Gordon Brown. This finer temptress that is fate is ultimately not going to favour Gordon Brown if he can't pull something together here. Ether Hub the draw. He's on 6. Here's another Scarab God and another answer to it in the form of Essence Scatter from Desani. He will not let Gordon Brown on the board here. But you know that Gordon Brown's smiling. It's never a frown with Gordon Brown. See what he can do here. Servant of the Conduit. It's going to hold off the Gearhulk for at least a turn if Desani doesn't have anything to say about it.
Yeah, how about Fatal Push, and counter backup?
Well, there's the second Servant of the Conduit. What's he going to do about that? Fatal Push. Fatal Push. Doesn't need the disallow. Oh, does need the disallow. As simple as that. Jeremy Desani takes it out. using every single card in his hand. Ultimately, Gordon Brown not able to find a way through, and the French Pro Tour champion makes it all the way to the final of GP Brussels. Well, the stage is set now for our final, ladies and gentlemen. Mostly red aggro facing off against Esper Control. There are going to be sparks. There's going to be fireworks in the feature match area before very much longer. But for Simon and I, that's all she wrote today, sports fans. Thanks for hanging out with us this weekend. We're going to step out, make room for Tim and Raf to guide you through the finals. Simon, it's been a pleasure, as ever, my friend. I'll see you in Prague. Well, I'll see you before that. I'll probably, we're friends, probably catch up at least before that. But for the purposes of the viewers at home, I'll see you in Prague. And guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me this weekend. It's been fantastic. Stick around. On the other side of this, we'll be back with the final of GP Brussels with Tim and Raf. We'll see you then.